Hi, welcome to the Be a Maker Club podcast. Joining me today is Jatomis Stevenson, who is a maker with exceedingly high technical ability. And we're going to be talking about what he makes today, why he makes it. Jatomis, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for being here. So, right out of the gate, tell us a little bit about who you are, what's your background in making, what sort of skill set you have, and then we'll dive into what you do.
Okay. Um, Zeph, glad to be here. Glad to talk to you. So my background, I went to college at California State University, Los Angeles. I worked on several team projects, helped out with uh, formula here and there, worked on super mileage. I was the team captain of super mileage.
Sorry, what's super mileage? I don't think I know what that is.
So SAE super mileage is a competition that essentially creates a car from a lawnmower engine that
Oh,
that essentially uses a very minuscule amount of fuel for the distance that the vehicle travels. Now there are
hmm.
vehicles out there that have been able to do like a theoretical 1,000 miles to the gallon, right?
Wow.
So essentially, over the course of running a couple of laps, they run the laps, and you have a small vial of isooctane, which is a different kind of fuel. It's essentially octane 100. It's
Like
I
a
won't
high energy fuel?
not
No?
it's not high energy, but essentially it's a fuel that doesn't burn at high pressures, allowing
Okay.
for more energy extraction
Okay.
at higher pressures.
Okay.
Um, we can get more into that,
No,
but
no,
that's
no.
that's not the
Yeah, yeah,
purpose of
yeah.
this particular conversation. So the competition with that is to create an ultra lightweight, ultra efficient vehicle
Okay.
um, that can burn a very small amount of fuel while traveling a long distance.
Cool.
Um, and with that particular project, I started with designing the actual exterior of the super mileage vehicle.
Hmm.
It's all carbon fiber, and so uh, essentially I cut my teeth regarding design wise, making a a three dimensional model of an aerodynamic body, so to speak,
Yeah.
which included computational fluid dynamics. It's included CAD. It also included figuring out how to actually lay up and create the carbon fiber composites, the mold
Wow.
work, so plug mold, negative mold, um, and then again because this thing was fairly large, it was a team effort to actually like do the layup, make sure it was done properly, yell at the appropriate people for not doing things correctly. Um, not
So very much like the real world.
very much so. At least in a prototyping
Yeah.
fashion.
Sure.
The other thing that project did was like engine design. So part of it was essentially calculating out how large of a combustion chamber you would want, whether it's like creating a shallower piston movement. So there's things that you can adjust to an engine to make it more efficient in certain aspects, right? So like there's this theory of more torque versus more horsepower,
Hmm.
and that goes along with under square or over square engines. And again, that's super technical. And if anybody knows anything about cars, you'll understand what I'm saying. If you don't, let's just say that it's the difference between the type of engine that you get in a Ford Mustang versus the type of engine that you get in a Honda Civic.
Gotcha. Okay.
Um, so,
So,
it,
so
it,
that's the foundation of your technical knowledge.
yeah, I mean, in addition to that, like while I was at college, I learned how to essentially mill and lathe by hand at school. And so while I was at school, I made a hammer, right? The Anybody that has done the engineering thing, the hammer is probably the thing that you've done. So if you've done it, you know what I'm talking about. And from those skills, right, I applied those to super mileage by helping the team make essentially steering linkages and steering framework.
Okay.
So one of the teammates came up with a design, gave me the blueprints, and I go, okay, this is how I'm building it, and I essentially milled it with a manual lathe, and this lathe had considerable play in backlash. So you had to push into the dimension, and you couldn't back off, otherwise the dimension would be off. So.
So, I mean, to use a different analogy, it's kind of like riding a motorcycle into a curve. You committed
Yeah,
till you get out of the curve.
You're committed. You can't do that
back
again.
out. You can't back out.
Yeah, and so there was a lot of small cuts or essentially small passes just to make sure that, all right, are we on dimension? And so
Okay.
yeah, that is my technical background from a training aspect, so to speak.
Okay. Well, so then over the years, so what do you make, or what have you made that you want to talk to us about?
Well, I've made a lot of things. So like for a while when I worked at Boeing, I helped them design some plumbing regarding their helium lines. For this latest company that I've been working with, Kigt, I initially started out as a mechanical designer for this company. So I designed kind of like the way the actual enclosure would look like, what the actual charge station form would look like.
So wait, Kigt makes charge stations for electric vehicles.
Yes.
Right? Okay.
And from that point, right, when I got on, there was a team that did like different parts of the particular charge station. There were people that could do like the electrical work, the circuitry work, and the software development work. At the time, I didn't do any of that.
Okay.
But as it was a weird situation, and maybe not so weird looking back at it, but from a startup standpoint, it's a weird situation. Most people don't really experience this, where those other functions of the company essentially went away.
Oh, okay.
And initially, I took up the web dev role. In addition to my mechanical duties, because I was familiar with HTML, CSS, and basic web dev prior to that point. Again, from college, although this particular portion of college was grade 8 of college,
Okay.
and that's another story in and of itself. But suffice to say, I was helping with the website for that company to help them secure more funding. And then from that point, I don't know how it came around to it, but I had to be in charge of the electrical work. And for a while, I was working another job as a security officer to help pay for the expertise from my friend Lester Dolmos, who was originally on the project helping out with the electrical work.
Okay.
And so what I did was work the security job and use some of that money to pay for Lester to continue some of the work and to teach me on some of the electronics work.
Gotcha. Okay. Wow. So super, like, well, 100% of your life was pretty much committed then.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And so with that particular project, roundabout, so when I started that project, it was about 2013, right? And I had done several projects on the side as well for other clients. Like I designed like a pet camera for one person. I helped design the schema for another person's back end. They exited for $2 million. And then there's a lot of other stuff that I worked on that I can't really discuss, even though I have no idea if it was successful or not.
Okay. NDA, non-disclosure.
Yeah,
Okay.
I know I'm way past the NDA for a lot of those, but like me talking about it is kind of like, well, do you have any proof?
Right. Okay. Fair enough. I mean, it's okay. The whole idea for here is just to get a sense of who you are, and what your capabilities are, and what can you do? Like, what can you make essentially? So I think we're getting a really good picture of that now.
Yeah. And in 2016 is when I really started to take ownership of the electrical work on the charge station, and I took the device through UL testing, and that was the most nerve-wracking experience that I've ever had, simply because I was inexperienced in the electronics work, and I still had a basic understanding of how that system worked, but like I couldn't tell you if, say, like a signal went wrong on the digital side, right? The actual digital programming of the device, if it was a circuit issue, a software issue. So going through the certification process where it has to meet certain standards, it was like, all right, I hope it works. And if it doesn't, there was a lot of, all right, this works because of this, and justification through it, and going, hey, why are you testing it this way? You have to test it in this way in order to get the thing that you want. Now, I don't necessarily know if that's by the book, so to speak, but we did seem to find that the way this particular testing agency was running the test, it was like, but you essentially break the part when you're doing this during the testing, and it's like, why is it done this way? And so we had to work with them, and then on certain things where it's like, okay, it obviously failed, where we're like, okay, we got to change how we do this. So there was one where they had to drop like a 1 pound ball on the enclosure, and it essentially shattered the enclosure.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And so I was like, okay, so that's not going to work. So we ended up picking a different way of doing it. So instead of making it a multi-part design where you had the acrylic essentially glued behind the enclosure, and the acrylic essentially acting as the enclosure itself, and that's where the failure point was. So essentially the acrylic cracked and then it separated from the enclosure. Instead, we kept the original enclosure and essentially made sure that the enclosure was clear, and then cut the pattern into it.
Okay.
So, and then from that project, right, again, more carbon fiber work, or in our case, it was going to be fiberglass work, because we didn't need the carbon fiber, simply because it's super expensive.
Yeah.
And unnecessary for our particular applications. We don't need the advantage in strength to weight. We also looked into aluminum casting. There was some things where we worked into sheet metal presses, and then we've talked to quite a few different electronics assembly houses, electronics fab houses. So if you're in the California area and you're looking for any recommendations, I can kind of point you to certain people.
Cool. And we'll make sure to post all of Jatomis's information for this podcast, so you'll get all of that.
Yeah, and working with these companies, it was definitely very different, because they expect things to be done a certain way.
Right.
And if you don't meet those expectations, right, and you don't understand what they're asking for, it's essentially like you're talking Greek.
So I mean, would it be fair to say, if I paraphrase that a little bit, it's like, they belong to a certain segment of working. They're engineers who've been working in a certain way, and if you don't also work in that way, then it's you can't work with them. Or I mean, did you figure out? So did you change, or did you get them to change? I guess maybe that's the question here.
Well, you're never going to get an engineer in industry to change.
Okay.
That's never going to happen.
Okay.
Right. The best that you're going to get is a project manager that understands what you're going through and goes, okay, so you see what this engineer is talking about? This is what they're asking for.
Gotcha.
And then on my end, yes, there was a significant learning process and learnings to be taken in and essentially adjust how I look at things and understand. Okay, so that's what a Gerber file is. That's how you create that. Oh, they need a step file. Oh, they need an STL file. Oh, they need an IGES file. Oh, they need DXF files. And from understanding that, I'm like, okay, so these are the formats. These are how they understand what it is that you want to be designed and how they design it for you.
Okay. Okay. So I think this leads me really well into the question of you've really highlighted lots of technical things, uh, potentially problematic technical things as well that people have to understand before they start making. So now that you understand a lot of these things, why do you still make?
Well, so I still make for a couple of reasons, right? The first, maybe not the first one, but the easiest one to talk about is it's essentially my livelihood.
Okay.
So I design things, and um, people are like, oh, you know how to make things, and they reach out to me and they're like, okay, can you make this for me? Can you make this for me? Can you make this for me? Um, and I always go yes, with a cost.
Sure.
uh, with some friends, right, I'm like, yes, I can make it for you. I can make the first prototype. You expect me to run the factory, though.
Right.
You're barking up the wrong tree. I love you, but I'm not making this for you.
Okay.
I'll make one or two for you, and then if you're serious about this, we can go find somebody that
Do the production.
do
for
the
you.
production.
Yeah.
Yeah. Luckily for me, most of my friends have been fairly understanding about
Okay.
that. Anybody that's worked with friends can understand what I'm talking about.
Right.
Um, the other reason that I make is, in a lot of ways, it's a lot of it's a lot. It's a huge portion of how I guess define my personal value.
Okay.
So uh, during college, right? Let's just say I wasn't exactly the happiest person,
Okay.
and so doing design work, doing engineering work was kind of an outlet of sorts where I could be creative, be able to impart will upon the world, so to speak. Um, but also, right, as a way to kind of like ignore myself, ignore what I was feeling.
Okay.
Um, and it's very easy to do that when you're focused on solving a problem, right? Because you're in survival mode. It's like, I gotta solve this. Nothing else matters.
Mm-hmm.
Including emotions, which is exactly what I wanted at the time.
Right.
So from that, right, a lot of personal value or personal esteem comes from the ability to actually take a piece of paper and turn it into something real.
Right. So I noticed you said the word value a couple of times. So you mean that, I mean, and I feel the same way sometimes. You know, I've noticed in myself, like when I do DIY, many times now we've realized that what I've made can be bought for maybe 1/10 of the price and it'll arrive at my door completely ready to go. But I still want to make it because, and so the way I'm understanding value is that because you're making a physical thing and then you can see it being fabricated or finished and you can feel and touch it, it's real. It feels very real. And so the value then becomes, oh, right, I went from this being just an idea, a thought, like you said, piece of paper, to something physical, right? So it's very clear cut, I think, in that respect. And that's maybe where I personally feel that satisfaction. So is that a similar thing for you? Because when you said value, that's what I was focused on. Like, what is it that value that Why are you referring to value?
That is a very similar thing, and the satisfaction that you get from seeing a project's completion is immense. Um, Unfortunately, I have the particular temperament where it's like once it's done, it's like okay, let's go on to the next thing.
Right.
Which isn't exactly the best thing for satisfaction and feeling it, but like you feel great. 5 minutes later, okay, what are we doing next?
Okay.
But more so, I was talking about value in so terms of like how I view myself.
Ah, okay.
Right. So for a while, right, I didn't really have any sense of inherent value, and to an extent, I probably still don't. um, but the ability to create things, at least in my mind, manages to make me feel more real, so to speak, or at least me feel like uh, I have something to offer people.
Okay. That's the value you're adding to the world in general, maybe, or
Sure. If that's how we want to categorize the type of value that this is.
so. Okay. Now, not to get unnecessarily very philosophical, but I saw a short some time ago. I want to say it's a YouTube short or something, where someone said, um, there are two very important days in your life: the day you're born and the day you realize why you're born. So is that maybe some? I look, that part is, like I said, it's for the shorts, but it just that came to my mind when he said it. So is that what you're feeling when you say that?
I'd love to say yes. I would love to say yes.
Okay.
No.
Okay. That's fine. We're just trying to figure out, right? Like this whole podcast is really, that's what it's about, right? It's the reason I'm doing it is I want to try to find out why people make, what value it adds to their lives, to the lives of people they care about. So yeah, let's try to figure it out.
Well, I mean, okay, so the closest example to that particular analogy, right, is if that person was talking, right, they're essentially treading water, almost drowning, and then they find a boat.
Okay.
Right, because they know I have this boat. I can now do whatever I want. I don't have to worry about drowning. Right. For me, I found a dinghy. I found not a dinghy. I found a what's the word of that circular thing that lifeguards throw into
life preserver.
Yeah, I found a life preserver, just enough to keep my head above water.
So I mean that's still okay. So that's a temporary raft, right? Like
yeah.
Essentially, okay.
So it's something that I do. Does it define my life? Yes and no. Because I'm good at it. It pays the bills. Is it who I am?
Well, maybe it is. Do you? I mean, okay. So, would you say that is who you are now?
Sure.
And like a lot of people, people change. And I've been through many changes. Lots of people change, right? And in today's world, because we have so much information at our fingertips, it's easier to learn about things that you might want to do or you might want to be like, and then change, right? I think the flexibility to do that now is so much more easier and accessible than it was maybe 10, 20 years ago.
Oh,
so
significantly
yeah.
so.
Yeah, so I mean I would say it's not just a life preserver. Maybe your life preserver is a raft, maybe even a yacht. More permanent, still mobile though, right? And you can always change yachts, right? You can go from the yacht that you're in to a bigger yacht.
Maybe I just have dinghy glasses, right?
Yeah.
Maybe I'm looking at my yacht and thinking it's a life preserver.
Well, it's a life preserver you've been on for a while.
For a while.
So that's the only reason I said it's no longer just a life preserver. You got stuff on it, man. So it's big.
Oh, fair point. Fair point.
Okay. All right. So So wait, the question I asked was, why do you make? So one, livelihood.
Hmm.
And obviously livelihood means that because you're making money, you the implication is that you are also good at it. That's why people pay you money,
Yeah.
right? Is there another reason? Like, I mean, so wait, sorry. The second reason that we did start talking about a little bit was that was the thing that was there, and you took it. So, is there anything more you want to say about that? Like, is there a reason you would want to continue making other than your livelihood?
Um. Well, yeah. So just the ability. Let me tell you, it's a huge, maybe crutch, but confidence booster
Mm-hmm.
to know that if something happens, you can build something for it.
Right.
Like if something breaks, trace it out, continue to sketch, either 3D print it or cut it on a router or
Yeah. Yeah.
fill it in with glue or whatever, right? Make a cast for it. You can fix it. You can fix it right away. Like even if I had absolutely no money in the world, right? I could go, hey, can I borrow some yada 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 yada, right? And for the stuff that you need to fix stuff, it's like pennies,
Yeah.
really. And the ability to do that and to be able to fix things and to be able to, it's just it's huge. Like it's essentially a massive safety blanket.
Right.
So like say if you have a car and you understand how to fix a car, right? Knowing that, okay, all I got to do is, in some situations, right, all I got to do is resolder a wire or whatever, right? I got to resolder a wire, or I just got to do an oil change, or I just got to put some coolant in, right? Knowing at the very least that far, right, is huge, right? It's like,
Yeah.
it's the difference between, so I own a BMW, right? It's the difference between going, okay, I can get by with continuously filling it up with oil, continuously filling it up with water, or dropping $2,000 or $3,000 to get the coolant system fixed, to get the oil system fixed, to swap out parts.
Right, right. And that then has obviously other implication because then you go, oh, well, okay, so if I have this car, it costs this much to maintain because that's what the dealer is charging me,
Correct.
right? Without actually understanding, and that's actually a really great point. So I'm an immigrant myself, right? I didn't grow up in the U.S. You did, especially California. And when I was growing up, when I saw American TV shows or lifestyle in the U.S., one of the things that I was always excited by was that there were always these shots of people working on their cars, like dads, granddads with their kids, and people were always making things, right? And that for me, that was a big allure of coming to the U.S. And part of the reason I was attracted to that because I thought that when you have the ability to make things, you're a lot more confident as a person because you're not afraid of anything, right? Like in that respect, like you can get into any situation and you go, oh, I can fix this. Like, and so it's not just your literal skill set that you have. So like physics, math, all welding or stuff. But then it becomes like an attitude for you, right?
Yeah.
That I'm not afraid of any situation because as long as I have the ability to gather myself with resources, I can fix this, right? And for me, I think that's a big appeal that I had as an immigrant come to the U.S. And so for me, making is a big part of that. Like, is being American is to make, and that was my. I mean, now I would say that to exist as a human, you should make. That's how I would say it now. But I would say that was my appeal. And so what you said sounds similar to me. Like it says that you built up this skill set, and now you enjoy that you can fix problems, but that's also now in you. That's who you are as a person as well.
Yes. Yeah, very
So
much
so so okay. So first reason livelihood. Second reason because it gives you a sense of satisfaction,
Sense of satisfaction.
identity, right?
Yep.
What was there something else you were like? We're trying to. So I'm trying to like maybe more concrete conclusions about why you make.
Self-confidence, self-competence. Um, there was another word that was sitting in my head that it'll probably come to me a bit later. Um, but yeah, essentially, it grants you a level of mastery over your environment that you previously did not have.
Right. Is there a specific type of thing that you like making?
Hmm. New stuff.
It just okay.
Like it just like I like making things that haven't been made before. So that's why I like my profession, right? Because people come to me and they're like, I need you to make this, and I'm like, okay, cool. And if it's truly novel, I enjoy the heck out of designing it because it's brand new, hasn't been done before,
Right.
um, and it's fantastic. And even if here's the other thing, right? Like even if it has been done before, there's usually like something different that has to happen in order. Otherwise, they wouldn't have come to me to get it done. They would have just bought something off the shelf and slapped something together. Uh,
Can you give? I know there were lots of NDAs, but is there an example you can think of, maybe?
um, there was one, and I think it's simple enough that I'm not really going to step on toes, so to speak. So I had somebody come to me wanting to do like a protein shake, uh, like dispenser or something.
Okay.
Um,
Like in powder format?
yeah, in powder
Okay.
format, and they wanted something super complicated. It had like a closing mechanism, and like you had to put it together, and th- actually this one's kind of the one where it isn't super novel, and in this particular one I kind of talk the person out of the idea.
Okay.
um, Simply because I was like, okay, so this is what you're trying to do. It reminds me of these things, which already exist. So it would have to be better than these things that
Right.
already exist.
Yeah.
And then, because of the way you want it to be made, it has these downsides, right? Namely, with the way he wanted it to be made, it had like small areas, places where powder could get stuck, places where moisture could collect, places where you'd essentially create a health hazard by having
Right.
it
Right.
in the environment.
It have nooks and crannies
Yeah.
inside somewhere. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And so I was like, okay, so in order to avoid these downsides, you have to remove some of this complexity. And so I came up with a solution for him to do it in a certain way, and he was like, "Oh, that sounds really great." I haven't heard back from him.
Which is, I mean, that's very common in studio things, right? People just ghost on you. But I think that brings up a really interesting point, and I think maybe touching upon, I'm trying to think through like what you said about why you enjoy and the newness of it, right? Because if I look at your background that you previously talked about, very technical, you're talking about automotive or the charge station, right? The format, the physical construction of that is very different to say a protein dispenser. And so while the protein dispenser itself might be physically easier to design, understanding how the powder needs to be dispensed is then that's the part you'd have to learn,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Basically, this would be a simpler design, but why is it simpler, right? Well, give me another example. Is there any other project you can talk about that was, quite? Because I feel like automotive to protein dispenser very different.
Very different.
Not the skill set, but the actual understanding of how the product should come about.
So let me see. There was so I have a client that wants a gantry put together. I have partial ownership in this particular project. But in this project, uh, it requires a lot of controls. It requires a lot of putting together of different components.
Hey, sorry, we're gonna have to clarify. What is a gantry?
So a gantry is very similar to like a crane, except it has two legs, and then it goes over something,
Okay.
and then it goes down, up.
So we'd see this in factory floors mostly.
Yes, factory floors. In this particular case, very much a factory floor.
Okay.
This one's a smaller scale gantry, but again, it's designed for moving materials.
Gotcha.
In this particular case, right, a gantry's been done before. But this particular type of gantry also has been done before. However, with this one, it was a matter of, okay, how can we build it with these budget constraints and with materials that we can source here in the US without having to, say, go to China or go to India or some other weird permutation of that.
Gotcha.
Because the customer wanted it to be built here because he wanted it to build it in his shop and he wanted to control it.
Gotcha. So again, in this case, it's not the actual construction of the gantry or the design of the gantry. That's actually a lot simpler, easier to do. It's working under the constraints that were defined by the customer: budget, U.S. localization, right? You've got to figure all of those parts out.
Yes.
So it's the supply chain issue. And this is not a production piece. This is like a one-off thing, right? You're essentially making a one unit for this particular.
Yes.
In this case.
In this case, so the idea for this particular project is that we want it to be something that we make continuously.
Oh, okay.
However, we have to get this prototype made, and we have to make money on the prototype. Otherwise, this is going to be a giant waste of time.
Gotcha. Okay. So I think I'm getting a really good, a much clearer sense now. You define definitely kind of 2 or 3 things, both sort of economic, but also personal, of why you like making and what value it adds to your life, and I guess why you think it's important as your contribution to society in general, right? So if you were to give sort of a one-line recommendation to people of why they should learn to make.
For me, I think if you're going to undertake making,
Yeah.
do so because you want to better understand the world. Do so because you want to better understand how things work. And unfortunately, this isn't a one-liner, but do it because you want to have agency over the, in this case, things in your life, the objects in your life. Right?
Okay.
Once you know how to make, right, whatever it is, right, if it's shoes or furniture or whatever, right, knowing how to do that provides you an understanding of your environment, a greater understanding and a greater appreciation for the things in your environment.
Yeah.
If I could sum it up in a tagline, making provides you a greater insight into your world.
Jatomis, thank you very much for being part of the Be a Maker Club podcast. Hopefully we can bring you on again to talk about some new and exciting projects that you're doing, because you're doing new stuff every time.
Well, I appreciate it, Zeph, and I'm looking forward to that.